All right. Good morning and warm welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Victoria Custodio with the California Department of Public Health. And on behalf of the entire Active Transportation Resource team, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to the latest installment of the ATRC's On the Move Perspectives webinar series, which we branded as a way of recognizing the wide variety of people and disciplines that influence safe and active travel. All right, next slide. Okay, as this slide indicates, we are here today for an update on California's Crossing Guard program, guidance and resources. School crossing guards are an important part of communities and safe routes to school programs. Crossing guards serve a vital role for students who walk, bike, and roll to and from school. We have a wonderful speaker today who's going to speak on the ATRC's updated resources. So very pleased to welcome and introduce Kristin Haukom, who is a Senior Planning Associate with Alta Planning and Design. She has more than a decade of experience in safe routes to school and active transportation planning, as well as policies and programs and implementation. Prior to joining Alta, Kristin worked as the Southern California Regional Coordinator for the California Department of Public Health Active Transportation Resource Center. So very pleased to have her here. She's a beloved former colleague and has a wealth of expertise. So very excited to feature her as our speaker today. All right, but before we begin, let me just offer up a few reminders and some logistics for our participants. We do want to hear from you and make this webinar as interactive as possible. So we will have a Q&A section following Kristin's presentation. We've allotted an entire hour for this webinar, so we're really hoping for a robust discussion based on the information that's presented today and your questions from the field. We ask that you share your questions through the meeting, throughout the meeting by using the Q&A function. And we would prefer that over the chat function just because it allows us to do some helpful monitoring and that keeps us organized throughout this webinar. So please use the Q&A function. And then following the webinar, we will send, there will be a post-webinar attendee survey that we really would love you to complete. It comes up fairly quickly and we'll ask you some key information about your experience on this webinar. And so just a shout out early on to do that. And then lastly, we get this question all the time. Will the webinar be recorded and available following this presentation? And of course it will be. As with all of our webinars and teleconferences, we will post the recording along with the slides from the presentation and any resources discussed to our Active Transportation Resource Center website, and the address is available on this slide. Okay. All right, I hope I didn't skip a slide. Oops, excuse me. All right, thank you. Sticky fingers. All right, as always, for our webinars, we like to set clear learning objectives for all of our attendees so that you know at a minimum what you'll be getting out of participation today. Of course, for all of our webinars, we hope that you'll find direct application to your efforts, whether they are present or future efforts. So along those lines, today, the objectives are that participants will gain an understanding of California's Safe Routes to School Crossing Guard Training Crossing Guard Training Program and how it can be utilized by local jurisdictions. And then next, you'll learn why crossing guards matter, what key information is needed for local crossing, and what is needed for local crossing guard programs in California. Oops, sticky fingers, my apologies. All right, so we have 2 poll questions so that we know a little bit more about those of you who are on the call with us today. So I'll read through the first and then the second one, but you actually are able to do both poll questions at once. So very quickly, the first poll question reads, how familiar how familiar are you with the existing California Crossing Guard training program and guidance that was published in 2015? Your choices are very familiar, somewhat familiar, or not at all familiar. And then next question, sorry, is we'd ask that you tell us your affiliation and or the context of your interest in this topic. So really, where do you work? Are you at the city, county, state level? Are you a nonprofit organization? Are you in law enforcement? Do you work at schools? Are you or are you coming at this work as a ATP awardee? Crossing guard? Are you actually a crossing guard or a master trainer or other? So I believe you can respond to as many of those choices as are fitting. So we'll give that a minute. And then I'll just ask my team member to let me know when that is ready to go.
Looks like people are still answering. I'm gonna give it just another few seconds and then I'll end the poll.
No. All righty. Okay, and now we can all see, I believe we can all see the results. So for the respondents, we have the highest percentage who are not familiar at all. So that's 57%, but we do have somewhat familiar at 34%, Kristin, and also 9% that are very familiar. Then with regard to the breakdown of folks that are on the call, we have the largest number from cities and counties, 48 and 30%. At the state level, just 5% of us, nonprofit organizations, 7%, no one from law enforcement today. We do have some school representation, 5% are ATP grantees, and then 2% are crossing guard trainers, and then we've got some others. And I will actually ask if you fall into that category, if you wouldn't mind putting your comments in the chat so that we can just see what, who else is on the call. But with that, Kristin, we have a little more information as to who's joining us today. And so I'd like, again, to welcome you and have you bring up your slides so we can really get into the heart of today's presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for taking time this morning to talk with us about crossing guards. Again, my name is Kristin Haukom. I am a contracted instructor with the ATRC to provide this update to you today and provide ongoing training support. I've been working in the world of crossing guards for more than 10 years now, both at the state when I was with the ATRC, but also my work with Alta Planning and Design with advising local communities, regional agencies, and other states with training and administration. So I promise I know what I'm talking about. Here's our agenda today. I'm just going to give a quick highlight of what you're going to hear today. We're going to talk again why crossing guards matter, a history of crossing guards in the state, an update to the training program, diving into the school crossing guard administration training guidelines, a little guidance for local programs, discussion about crossing guard trainers, training and testing, practical training and field assessments, and then you will have time for Q&A. And I do invite you to ask questions. I find questions and answers are often the best way to get at the heart of questions probably most people have. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, why do crossing guards matter? Why are we even here this morning? Victoria alluded to it a little bit, but just to reinforce that crossing guards play an integral role in fostering a safe and comfortable environment for students walking and bicycling to school. Crossing guards can help create gaps in traffic, alert drivers that people are walking, and help instill safe walking skills in students and families. They also indicate to people driving when they should yield. And if you learn nothing from today's presentation, I want you to remember that school crossing guards do not direct traffic. That is not their role. Rather, they create gaps in traffic, almost like a stop sign or other traffic control device, making it safer for students and other pedestrians to cross. In 2012, a University of California San Francisco study asking parents and caregivers, ranked safety of intersections and crossing as the #1 concern affecting their decision to allow their students to walk and bicycle. This is important because we want kids to choose walking and biking, so we want to make sure that it's safe for them to do so. In the same study, parents and caregivers ranked crossing guards as the #2 reasons why they would actually let their students walk or bike to school, with walking and bicycling with an adult being #1. And from my experience working in safe routes to school, talking with parents and caregivers and other school staff, this continues to be true. So where did this all start? In 2015, as Victoria mentioned, the Safe Routes to School Technical Assistance Resource Center, which is now the ATRC, published the California School Crossing Guard Training Guidelines. This was an initiative of our then Safe Routes to School coordinator at Caltrans, Don Foster, who saw the need for a standardized statewide training program. The 2015 guidelines, though were not mandated, provided consistent operating standards informed by California law, the local school crossing, to assist local school crossing programs in training existing and new crossing guards. The 2015 guidelines were designed to be self-studied, used by local programs to train their crossing guards. Back then, there was no budget yet for an instructor-led train the trainer course. So we started by providing these self-study materials and other training resources on the website. So what's different? What's changed since then? We've updated the guidance per the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or MUTCD. The goal of the training program is to continue to provide standardized training statewide. It's been reformatted to provide clear direction for local programs and includes a crossing guard train the trainer virtual training, which I'll talk about more later. It provides more instruction, really more guidance on how to train new and existing crossing guards. And the training materials themselves will no longer be posted on the ATR website. Rather, crossing guard trainers will have exclusive access to those materials once they complete the Train the Trainer course. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been doing this work for more than a decade. And through consultation with the California Department of Public Health, Caltrans, and ATRC, we really saw a need to make these updates based off of best practice and real world scenarios and experiences. Here's a picture of the new School Crossing Guard Administration and Training Guidelines. This information is really intended for local programs. Anybody can read it and find really great information, but the target audience really are local programs. And they are defined as the fiscal or the implementing agency responsible for crossing guards, which may include cities, counties, schools, school districts, and police departments. Oh, I had sticky fingers too. So just to highlight what the guidance is for local programs and the guidelines, you'll learn about hiring and managing and training crossing guards, uniforms and equipment needed, securing funding to staff crossing guards, guidance on identifying locations where crossing guards are needed, addressing liability and risk management, and a little more direction on obtaining a crossing guard trainer to train crossing guards and the crossing guard train the trainer course that they have to go through. So local programs are set to hire and manage and train crossing guards. What does this mean? Well, there are certain minimum qualifications outlined by the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And the reason for this is because crossing guards are responsible for safety of students, so they've set some minimum qualifications, and you can find that in the guidelines. They should also be prepared to inform crossing guards about their schedule and any changes and letting them know where they should be located or placed. A local program should have an emergency response plan in place and also be prepared to provide first aid or CPR training to new crossing guards. There's a minimal standard on the crossing guard uniform, and that includes a high visibility retroreflective vest or outerwear and a stop paddle, with the option of having a high visibility hat and or a whistle. I often get asked the question about how do we fund our crossing guards? And I don't have a one size fits all answer for you, unfortunately. I've seen many different ways on how local jurisdictions do fund their crossing guards. And it can include the LCAP, or the Local Control Accountability Plan, which is a school district plan that outlines how to spend dollars on programs at the school district. There's also maybe access to misdemeanor fines and forfeitures from those who are violating traffic laws. The California Caltrans Active Transportation Program provides funding, but only for the purposes of training and supplying equipment to crossing guards. They do not pay to staff crossing guards. Similarly, the Office of Traffic Safety, or OTS, also provides funding for training and materials, but does not fund positions. I've seen a blending or shared costs between districts and cities as a way to make sure that they have ongoing support from crossing guards. And then, of course, if you're lucky enough to have general funds or department funds to allocate to crossing guards, that's an option too. Identifying where crossing guards are needed. This should really be an ongoing conversation between school officials, law enforcement, and local programs. It is an art and not a science, I'll say, but because there's many, many factors that contribute to the need for crossing guard at a particular location. There is guidance in the MUTCD, and here are a few of those factors. So the age of students. Obviously, younger students, elementary and middle, have a harder time judging traffic and when they may be able to cross. So that's those that you'll typically see crossing guards at elementary schools and middle schools, although it's not uncommon to have them at high schools too. Pedestrian volumes certainly play a role in this. If there's more students walking, there may be more safety concerns and a need for crossing guards. Collision data may tell us where there might be issues in the roadway that might warrant, or I don't want to use the term warrant, sorry, that might indicate a need for a crossing guard. A traffic control type is important to note too, because uncontrolled crossings that have a stop sign or a traffic signal really might be a place where you want to consider putting a crossing guard. Even if they have a high visibility crosswalk, it may be harder for people driving to see people crossing the roadway. Proximity to school is an important factor too, because those crosswalks that are near schools, maybe within a quarter mile or actually abut the school, tend to have higher volumes of student pedestrians and may need to have a crossing guard. And then finally, one of the additional things to consider is vehicle traffic volume. So if there's lots of cars going through an intersection, you might want to consider putting a crossing guard to help with student safety. I think I mentioned this previously, liability. Oh, I think it was funding. I got a lot of questions. I also get a lot of questions on liability and risk management. And I can tell you that following a curriculum like this, the new California guidelines, will help you in limiting your liability and risk. But we're fortunate to have this wonderful guidance from Change Lab Solutions, Crossing with Confidence, that gives more guidance on how to mitigate from risk. And this is included in the guidelines in more detail, but I do encourage you to visit their website to check out this resource. But some of the guidance includes clearly specifying where and when a crossing guard will operate. So what are their hours of operation? When will they be at their location and which days? Making sure that your crossing guard staff are screened, trained, and equipped. Preparing for absences, making sure there's substitute crossing guards. And then educating teachers, school staff, and students and families about the program. So letting them know this is a resource available to them and to use it. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is just checking to make sure you have adequate insurance. So does your insurance have an efficient workers' comp insurance program? Do you have your if you're having volunteer crossing guards, are they considered to be insured by your policy? Okay, obtaining a crossing guard trainer to train crossing guards. Who can train new or existing crossing guards is left to the discretion of local programs. However, it is recommended that a crossing guard trainer be an experienced crossing guard or law enforcement officer. And then this person should attend the crossing guard training course, which is laid out as a train the trainer course and facilitated through the Active Transportation Resource Center. So the idea is the person that's identified by the local program should attend the virtual course and will be given access to the training materials. During the course, crossing guards trainers will learn how to deliver the training and testing for new crossing guards. The topics included in the training are the uniform and equipment, the actual proper crossing procedure, helping crossing guards prepare for testing, and letting them know what to expect during practical training and field assessment. Once a crossing guard trainer has the training materials, they can deliver the crossing guard trainer virtually or in a classroom setting. Again, totally at the discretion of the local program and what's easiest for you to implement. And testing can be completed electronically too. You'll have access to a paper test, but we'll also have tests available electronically for you to share with your crossing guard candidates. Practical training and field assessments must be completed in person. This is a way for you to check to make sure that the crossing guards are performing their duties properly and they understand what their role is. But there is guidance on how to do this in the crossing guard trainer manual. And that includes the practical training, what to cover, and a field assessment, which is the final check mark for crossing guards to make sure that they're performing their job properly and then can be assigned to a location. So what's next? After today's meeting, registration will go live. You'll get a notification that it's live. And this again is for local programs to register crossing guard trainers. At this point, it's open to anybody because we really want to get this information out. So please look for that registration coming soon. The guidelines themselves will also be posted soon. And I mentioned earlier, it's a resource for local programs, but anyone can look at it and will get good information about crossing guards. Here's my contact information. I would be happy to, excuse me, talk to you about your unique situation, talk through any technical assistance you may need related to crossing guards. So please, please feel free to reach out to me to talk about your specific or unique needs. And with that, I think that Victoria, you would like to open it up to question and answer.
Victoria, you're muted.
Thank you. It takes a village. All right. So thank you, Kristin. That was absolutely wonderful. Every time I listen to you talk, I'm just like, she is such an expert. She knows this content so well. And we are in California are so lucky to have you. Really, your expertise. I know this is also a passion project for you. So very, thank you so much. As Kristin mentioned, we are in the Q&A portion of our webinar, and we have a good amount of time for some really robust Q&A. Just as a reminder, we ask that folks use the Q&A function versus the chat to allow us to monitor and keep organized as we move forward. So on that note, I believe we have our first question. All right. So Kristin, so you mentioned paid crossing guards. Is there any guidance for volunteer crossing guards that we can look at?
Yeah, so volunteer crossing guards are fantastic. I love that people want to volunteer their time. The guidance would be that they should attend all training just like a paid staff. And then I mentioned earlier that if making sure that your insurance policy covers people who are volunteering.
Fantastic. Okay. Next question isn't it viable to build the okay, this is looking at some infrastructure as well as crossing guards. So the question reads, isn't it viable to build an overhead bridge, the overhead bridge on the main school crossings, rather than training and hiring guards that will also prevent the disruption of traffic? So that's kind of a big picture question. But maybe you could speak to how, in a safe systems approach, we really do want to have multiple strategies to address safety. Go ahead, Kristin.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Yes, in a perfect world, a bridge would be amazing. I can't speak to the feasibility at all locations, and I would ask that you talk specifically with your local jurisdiction. But crossing guards have additional benefits to having that adult presence that helps mitigate against stranger danger feelings. It's also a quick solution, short-term solution. So if there's an immediate need, you can place a crossing guard the next day, whereas longer-term infrastructure or infrastructure may be a longer-term solution at a particular site.
Fantastic. Really appreciate you taking on that question. All right. The next question we have is, what is the typical cost for a crossing guard program per school or per location? And wondering if you could speak to the startup versus ongoing costs.
That is a fantastic question too. There's no one size fits all, but in general, a crossing guard might make between $15 to $25 per hour. And then their schedules are usually about an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. So if you can quantify that by location and by school, I'll give you a rough estimate of what it costs. I want to remind us that crossing guards are actually a very low cost solution for what the return is on the investments. Startup costs, training, so you want to quantify the training time. We've suggested that a crossing guard trainer, the course itself will be about 2 hours. And then the crossing guard trainee or the candidate, the crossing guard course for them to complete is about 4 hours. And this is just a general number. It could take shorter. I don't think it'll take longer, but that's about the estimate. Then the in-field training, in-person training, I would allot another 4 hours for that. So that should help give you a ballpark of what it might cost.
That's a great way to outline time, the costs in terms of time for both training and implementation, Kristin. And I think as part of the ATRC Resource Center, we could probably do a little bit more to document kind of how to think about assessing costs based on time and standards for personnel costs, things like that. Great question. Thank you so much. All right, moving along. So I'll read it straight out. I feel like every school should have a crossing guard. Some schools in my city don't have a crossing guard, and even though parents want crossing guards because they don't feel safe, they won't bring crossing guards to their school because there's little collision data. Any idea on how to work around that? Great question.
It's a wonderful question. So as I mentioned in my slides, there's a number of reasons why you would place a crossing guard, and collision data is just one piece of the puzzle. So I do want to reiterate that it's an art, not a science, and that there can be many other reasons for having a crossing guard. I'm just going to go back to my slides to read through it so I can say it appropriately. So if there's the age of the students or younger students might need crossing guards. If there's lots of people walking, you're going to want to consider that. And I mentioned collision data is, again, just a piece of the puzzle. Traffic control type. So if you're in a mid-block crossing with no stop sign or no rapid flashing beacons, that's a great place to consider having a crossing guard if it's right near the school or if you have higher vehicle volumes. But any conversation about where a crossing guard should be placed should really be done in consultation with the stakeholders involved. So school district, law enforcement, and the actual jurisdiction where they might be placed, like in their roadway. So convene those folks and have a very frank conversation. And I do know that budget is an issue sometimes. So what a jurisdiction might do is look at the entire city or look entire area and see where's the most need, and then prioritize based on that. I wish so much we could put a crossing guard or have that resource available where it's needed or really where it's wanted. And maybe those who are listening could think about that, allocating funds, active transportation funds for crossing guards. But we'll see. I just wishful thinking at this point.
Appreciate that. All right. Let's go into the next question. Why is the use of a whistle considered optional? As a crossing guard, I've experienced multiple occasions where vehicles have attempted to cross in violation of my stop paddle, and use the whistle. The use of the whistle has been very effective in getting attention. So
that's a great question. Whistles, the way you're using it is exactly right. It should be only used to get the attention of drivers who are violating a traffic law. It's optional because it's such a subjective tool. And so it's really left to the discretion of local programs on how they want to use that. But it sounds like you're using it correctly, and I would encourage you to share that resource or that information with others.
Great, yeah, and as Kristin mentioned in her presentation, there's some basics or minimums that have been highlighted, but if you're really working in the interest of child safety, it's really I think optional often becomes required when you take that perspective. So appreciate Joe for sharing the in the field experience. Okay, next question. Is the Train the Trainer course that's coming up free?
Oh, great question. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely free. That's what's so exciting. So we didn't have this resource 7 years ago. But yes, the ATRC has, and Caltrans and California Public Health have recognized the value and are investing in this training. So yes, it's free to users, absolutely virtual. So you do need to plan maybe 2 hours of your time that you can take away from work, or if your work will pay for your attending. But yes, the actual registration is completely free. Great.
All right, thank you. All right, so this is a question from our friend Rochelle, who says, I'm having trouble finding the documents on the ATRC resources page. Just a question about, can you help with the navigation? And so Kristin, if you wouldn't mind just sharing again, kind of the updates that are going to be happening to the website and such.
Yeah, so the current guidelines have been taken down because we're about to launch the new ones, and they will be posted I'm hoping by the end of this week, but probably early next week, and you will get a notification when they're actually posted. Reminder, it will only be the new guidelines that will be posted and a registration link for those wanting to complete the Train the Trainer course.
Great. All right. So next question reads, is there research included in the new guidance that points to the benefits as we make the case for more or a new crossing guard program?
Not more than I shared previously. So we point to the data talking about behavior change related to crossing guards. So people wanting to allow their students to walk or bike. I don't have that data. If it exists, will you please send it to me to show that crossing guards, well, anecdotally, yes, crossing guards help improve safety at locations because they alert drivers to people walking. But no, I don't have additional data, but happy to look deeper if I can get a specific what you might be looking for.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, I'm just going to maybe throw this out there. And we know this question is coming from Chanda, who's one of our local health department friends, colleagues working at the local level. And, I'm thinking that, I wonder if there is more research now that speaks to kind of the points that you were making in terms of like the added perceptions of safety, maybe the greater social cohesion for a community, all of the things that we know can kind of make a walking environment more welcoming, in addition to creating safer a safer roadway system. So for users. We would be, I think, we'd be curious to see what literature is out there. And because as we know, I mean, I think the case for having more students walk and bike is often related to a number of different issues. And so even if there's a push to have more students walking or bicycling, say for environmental reasons, at the core, if it's not safe and welcoming, it's probably not going to happen. So crossing guards are part of that, system. And so I think, maybe there's some literature out there to support that framework. So appreciate that question a lot. All right, quantifiable benefits for sure. Okay. All right, so let's go to the next question. All right, school districts don't want to take on liability, which makes it often makes it difficult to have crossing guards at schools. Is there a way to incentivize districts to get a crossing guard from your experience?
Yeah, it's another great question. I like to see school staff, like classified staff, lunch duty folks, those who are doing yard duty, as crossing guards, because any funds that the school district might receive, either from the city or other, can be used to help augment that staff. And then those are people typically who will show up. They'll be there for their time. The crossing guard schedule can be really tough. It's only an hour in the morning or an hour in the afternoon, and that doesn't necessarily work for all people. So having staff serve that role, I think would be really, I've seen it be very advantageous, both in terms of making sure there's someone there, and then for the school to have an actual employee doing that work, and then they're covered by all the things that they would be as an employee. Would you mind repeating the question? I want to make sure I answered that appropriately.
Sure, yes. So so school districts don't want to take on liability, which makes it difficult to have crossing guards at schools. Is there a way to incentivize districts to get a crossing guard? I think there's an added, question about the liability issues.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So certainly if it's school staff, that will help making sure that anybody who's performing the duty is under the insurance of the school. I would be happy to talk with this person offline about their unique needs. I mean, I've seen crossing guards live at school districts, so there is precedent for it, and I can certainly connect the person who's asking the question to those who are actually dealing with crossing guards and potential liability at the school district level.
Perfect. And you had, I think the training of the crossing guards is a huge piece of doing your due diligence, as well as I think reading through some of the research provided from Change Lab and best practice. So we'll have that resource along with all of these Kristin's slides and the recording sent out to everyone who's attending. So definitely we'll have more information for Jessica to work with, and then Kristin, we can connect you afterwards.
Victoria?
Yes, Marianne.
A couple of questions came in via the chat. Can I go ahead and ask them?
Please.
Sure. Does Caltrans keep a database of those who have completed the training?
It will be via the ATRC, but yes, we will have registration, and that will be our way to track folks who are registered and then those who actually complete it. I want to shy away from the term certified. It would be more of like a certificate of completion. We're not prepared to certify people as other states have done, Florida and such, but certainly we'll keep a record of those folks. It's private information though, so if they're looking for a way to track who's completed it, that would be something that you want to do at the local level.
And the next question asks, are there any examples of city or school districts that have developed a model to retain crossing guards? And the comment is they're typically only a couple of hours long.
I will say that keeping crossing guards is a challenge, and it's been a challenge ongoing. Certainly, I mentioned previously, having them be staff of the school or school district is a good way to make sure that you have that pool of folks. Having multiple people trained at the school site so that they can serve as in that role if there's an absence or other. What was the second part of the question?
So
I'm sorry, retain the crossing guards, and then the person recognized that it's only 2 hours a day.
Yeah. So I think it sounds like a sweet gig for maybe someone who's retired or, you know, someone who's going through is in school. But if it's a concern about making sure people are placed, having multiple people at a location trained to be crossing guards to fill in the role if they can. I understand there's certain rules, school staff such as teachers and admin aren't necessarily allowed to be in the roadway, but there are staff who are allowed, such as classified, if it's under their contract. And then having those folks serve the role as a crossing guard is a great way to make sure that you have someone showing up at 7 or whatever the time is, then they can work a day at the school site, and then in the afternoon they can be the crossing guard. I haven't mentioned this yet. It's a whole nother can of worms, but student safety patrol is another thing that can be used to help with roadway safety. That's a whole, like I said, another can of worms, because for all the reasons we're talking about, there's liability issues. But there are I mean, I've seen it very successful, and they serve a similar role as a crossing guard in that they create a gap in traffic, but the students aren't actually physically in the roadway. They're doing more of that, you know, that dropping down at the stop sign. That might be a solution for some school sites who are having trouble keeping and retaining crossing guards. The pandemic has not been our friend in keeping crossing guards, unfortunately. So I do know that continues to be a struggle from local jurisdictions.
sure. And worker retention is kind of one of the themes of 2022. So
Go.
very good question. It's something for us to kind of think about at the ATRC level as well. Okay, let's keep on moving on to these questions. I'm so grateful that everyone's putting their questions in. Okay, so so this was the question reads, when you hire a new potential crossing guard, you suggested they take a test, ? After they've been backgrounded and improved. This program in particular is under the local PD. Will they then attend the training? So this is kind of a big picture logistics. But they did say that they missed the first few minutes because they'd had trouble with audio.
I don't know that we specifically walked through this question, so it's a fantastic question. Yes, complete all background, all logistics for hiring someone. Then they should take a training by your local crossing guard trainer. And then part of that training is taking a test.
Mm-hmm.
After they've completed the test successfully, and it's a very simple test. I mean, no one's trying to be tricked. It's just really an understanding of some of the content. Then they'll complete the in the field practical training where they actually learn how to, or practice learning how to cross students safely. And then the final is completing a field a review. So they're making sure that they are actually doing their job properly, understand how to cross students, and that would be the final. So it's really 4 parts. 1, training. 2, testing. Those happen together. And then practical training and a field assessment. And those also can happen together. But it's just making sure that the last part is making sure that the crossing guard has in the field experience, understands their locations and any conditions, lighting, et cetera, that they might need to consider when crossing students.
Yeah, perfect, Kristin. And then just as a reminder, just Kelsey, I'm reading your question in its entirety. So the new resource that the ATRC is providing is a train the trainer program. So if you are in the position of training crossing guards, this is going to be a resource for you as a first part to have the training and materials to be kind of the master trainer for your program. So hopefully that helps. And then, okay, this is a question about wondering who is in charge of hiring and training school crossing guards. Is it usually a school district?
It can be. So it can be, so we talk about the term local programs, and those are defined as, I want to make sure I'm reading it right. the fiscal or implementing agency. So that could be a city, a county, a school, or a school district, or police departments. I've seen it so many different ways. I mean, we had someone talking about it's in PD in their jurisdiction, other jurisdictions, it's housed at the city, others are, it's at the school, but it could be a blend of the school funds and city funds. It could be, yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, next question, rolling along. This particular program has the opportunity to build crossing guard kits. So far, they've got a vest, they're including vests, stout paddles, and whistles. What else do you think should be included? And what would cones be appropriate?
Cones could be appropriate, depending on the location. So I don't want to say that that is necessary. The other thing considered, I don't know if they said hat. I don't know about you, but I'm trying not to get that much sun exposure. So having a retroreflective hat is, having it be retroreflective, just like the vest, will help with visibility, but then sun protection. The other thing that I didn't include as like a piece of equipment, again, because it's a little bit subjective, is a notepad. So that would be for the purposes of writing down any unsafe behavior. But we don't want the crossing guards to become the bad guy. But that would be for taking notes and keeping record of things that might be happening at their particular location that they may want to share back with their supervisor. We don't recommend having, there's guidance that crossing guards should not be on their phones during their job. But if you do need to get a hold of a crossing guard, you might consider having using a two-way radio. Again, you want to avoid them being distracted while they're crossing. But if there is an urgent need to get a hold of them for whatever reason, that could be a consideration too. And maybe sunscreen. The theme of keeping yourself protected from the sun here in California.
So important, yes, also a public health issue. Okay, so do you suggest calling the local schools and asking if we could train teachers and staff?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. I will just give you a warning that's very possible that they're not allowed to be in the roadway. I've run into that where certain union contracts do not allow for that role, even though I'm sure you've seen your neighborhood principal doing their best to manage traffic in the morning and the afternoon. But certainly I would want to make sure you include the jurisdiction. If you're the jurisdiction, that's perfect. Absolutely invite them to do that. And maybe that will open a conversation about staffing crossing guards and making sure that, you're providing that additional support.
Fantastic, great. And I'm looking at our list. I think we just have a few more questions. Can metropolitan planning organizations, MPOs, play any role in fostering crossing guards?
Yes, that's fantastic. So I'd say they would be a great resource to do so I mentioned previously that we're not doing in the field training. That's not entirely true. We are going to be offering some in the field experience training on not a case by case basis, but Caltrans district by district. More information to come on that. But if an MPO wants to host me coming and providing that in the field training and or the classroom experience, so it's a virtual training, meaning that it's on the HRC. We will be providing a virtual course for you. It'll be live, but it'll be via Zoom. But if you'd like to host an actual training where you can have all your local jurisdictions come and have their crossing guard trainers trained and then go through a field experience so they get that additional support, that'd be great. I would love to visit that. And then as an MPO, you might have access to fund crossing guards depending on all the things. But no, certainly I think having that regional support would be amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, whoever asked that question. All right. And then we've got two more on the queue right now. So this is about retraining current crossing guards. Should they be retrained? I have some that have been here for 14 years, which is before Kelsey has started managing the program. That's a great question. Retraining.
It is a great question. And there is guidance in the guidelines, 2 years. Every 2 years, they should get a refresher. So going through the training again, and or taking a test and or being observed with using the field assessment tool. Those would all be, so the way the guidelines read, it's not required, it's recommended that it happens every 2 years. But I would say for your case, if it's been 14 years, yes, please.
Very good. Yeah. And also the guidance does tie into the California MUTCD, which is updated on a every 2 year basis. Is that what it is? I don't know.
Not quite, but yeah, it's updated.
Okay, good. Great question. Thank you. And then I believe we're at the end of our questions, which is great, but let's do this before we close shop. In Florida, school crossing guards are primarily under law enforcement, and that still works well. So that is great. Kristin, do you have any comments for, that comment?
Yeah, so Florida is the model. I mean, they are the gold star. They actually have funds through their state DOT to pay for crossing guards, which is fantastic. I would love to see that happen in California. But like I always say, or I like to say that California, we like to do things very differently than the rest of the country. And because currently the way locals communities staff their crossing guards is so diverse. So yes, they sometimes live in the police department. They sometimes just live in the city, police department, public works department of the city. They could live at the school district. They could live at the county if you're in a county. So absolutely, law enforcement, police department is an option. And if that works for your community, awesome. And yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add some 2 cents here to say that community engagement is such a big part of all project development planning. So I think that's always going to be the kind of the go-to as to, who might be the best for some of this work. But collaboration has always been a really wonderful way to leverage resources and again create a safer system. All right, I see my colleague Marianne with her hand raised.
Yeah, if I could just add, and this is an easy win. So you're talking about engaging with your community. Victoria, you're spot on. It starts a conversation, and who doesn't want to think about the safety of our students getting to and from school. So I think great suggestion.
For sure.
Kristin, if you wouldn't mind reiterating what will be up on the website in 2 weeks. And you mentioned there's a Zoom training that won't be up on the website. So just what people, when they go to our ATRC website and are notified that the guide is up, what will be there regarding the guide and the trainer? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen one more time just so that you can see what I'm, let me do this. There we go. So coming soon to the ATR website, which is linked here below. And I think Judy dropped the link in the chat. Registration for trainers, so crossing guard trainers who typically are those who've been crossing guard who've been done crossing guard for a while, and or law enforcement, or anyone that your local program wants to send to become a master trainer, as Victoria said so well. Again, completely up to local jurisdiction to choose whoever they want to be that trainer. We're keeping it very open because we're just getting started. So if you're an individual who just wants to go through the course, it's free. Just to remind everybody, it's free, and learn how to be a crossing guard trainer. And really, you're going to learn how to be a crossing guard through that process. That's the registration that will go live. That registration will be to a virtual Zoom training. So we have a number of set days and times, whatever works for you, but it will be a computer training led by me. And then you'll get the training resources to take back to your local jurisdiction to actually implement a training locally. The other thing that will be loaded to the website are the school crossing guard administration and training guidelines. So really we're talking about two things, the registration link and the guidelines. The guidelines are meant for local programs. It's guidance on how to run a program locally, things to consider, administration, liability, and such. And that's, again, a resource that anybody can review, but you're not going to get the how to cross in that. It's really meant to be a guidance for local programs in starting and running their programs. So the Zoom is a registration, it's a classroom-esque, PowerPoint, Zoom meeting type thing, and then resources to actually do the in the field training will be given to you. And then I mentioned very briefly, and I'm sorry I didn't have more information right now, but we are planning on having in-person opportunities that you can learn as a master trainer, learn how to cross students and how to then vet your crossing guards. That's going to happen in the fall at the various district offices throughout the state, Caltrans district offices throughout the state.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to share through our ATRC network all of the details so that folks are aware of what's happening when, so that they can participate at a local level. So thank you so much, Kristin. We got through so much content. I'm going to take the screen back if that's okay.
Oh yeah, please.
And then just wrap us up. We are almost at time. We're probably a little yeah, we've got 2 minutes. So in 2 minutes, I'm going to do just a few slides. Again, thank you, Kristin. Everything that we covered today will be has been recorded and will be posted to the ATRC site. We'll let folks know when that's available. On behalf of the entire Active Transportation Resource Center's non-infrastructure team, which we're all listed here, we want to say thank you to everyone tuning in today, as well as Kristin. If you don't know us, this is who we are. Kristin mentioned that we are a composite of Caltrans and the California Department of Public Health, working to serve the active transportation program. And CDPH does play a unique role in terms of non-infrastructure technical assistance. Our team includes Judy Polikoff, Marianne Hernandez, and myself, Victoria, who have been assigned to different regions. So please don't be shy, reach out to us as needed. We're here to answer your questions. And then just to plug again, once you close up the webinar, you're going to have access to an evaluation survey. Please, please, please complete that survey. It helps us, helps to inform our services moving forward. And we want to be as helpful as we can, because the work that you're doing is really wonderful and important. On that note, I believe we are at time. Thank you again to everyone for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.